I don't think it matters.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important 60 minutes of your week these days. Hello, I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador for today's show, and today's show's title is Untame Yourself. With me today are my favorite co host, Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator,
Yes, I'm lovely and wonderful.
and Dennis, our freedom facilitator from the other side of the pond.
Blessed love and greetings, and excuse for not having an image at this time, but I'm working on fixing that. I hope we will sort it out momentarily.
There's no image. I can see you. In any case, untame yourself. The idea here, and just to put it in an image, is a elephant being trained by a trainer, and the trainer is basically making the elephant do something crazy, and it's time that the elephant realize that he's an elephant and not a circus animal, and do his own thing. And that's what we're suggesting, that as a group of people, as a group of knowledgeable people, we can change our mind. We can do better, and we can untame ourselves and become the elephant that we were always meant to be. Get back into nature and do the things that elephants do.
Dennis, I think something is terribly wrong with our streaming because we do see the image of Raising Excellence, but there's nothing on the screen.
Uh-oh. But can they hear us?
I believe they can.
Okay. Well, just imagine an elephant.
Just the picture is the elephant, and it's a huge animal, and it's tied with a rope to something like really, I don't know.
Other
like
problem
flimsy.
is they can't see us either. They're just seeing a big blank nothing.
We're working on it. We shall have it figured out.
Oh, great.
No problem.
We're untaming ourselves, you guys. We're untaming ourselves.
It's the NSA. They're trying to stop us from untaming ourselves.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Dennis.
Hey, why you say that?
All right, but in order to untame ourselves, can you put us back on the screen somehow, Mr. Dennis?
I'm working on it. I'm
The
working on it.
intro is playing now. So I guess after the intro, we'll come back.
Or not.
Well, if they're out there and they're listening to us, we got to continue to talk. We can't just wait
The
until
intro had
the
its own
screen comes
music,
back.
but now we're
Oh,
still not on screen.
Well,
There's
it probably could be a few seconds before.
Yeah, we'll see what
No.
happens.
The intro played again, and this is what's playing on the internet. I'm sorry to give her bad news, but this is what's playing.
So nobody heard my introduction?
They heard your introduction, but there is no visual. There is just black screen. Look,
Okay, so
No,
they can
there
still
is.
hear us.
you can still
They
hear
can
us.
still hear us,
There
but
we
they
are.
just
Yay!
okay.
We
Very
are
good.
all good. Now our words make so much more sense because people can actually see us.
Hello, everybody. Sorry for the visual problems there, but with that said, untaming ourselves. Where do we
Yes.
begin? Other than the elephant, the idea here is to break the programming, break the conditioning, set ourselves free.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first on
Well,
this?
well, well look at our personal situations. Like, is there anywhere you, as our listener, or you, us, are feeling tamed right now? Are feeling chained? Are feeling bound? Are feeling unfree in some kind of way? So I think that's a good point to start. Where are we? Where are our hands and feet, our spirit, our emotions, our expression, the true freedom, the true all that we can be? Where is that bound? I could
You know,
go on.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And then of course, like I keep on coming back to the different levels, you know, to the physical, emotional, to the intellectual, and then to the spiritual level, which is a way of describing or trying to put into words the holistic nature of our being. So well, starting with the physical, I can see how there is some certain efforts being made to tame me and to stop me from going where I would like to go at this point of time, from even, you know, telling me how to dress and whom uh, I supposedly am able or allowed to meet with and when, and those are some pretty heavy restrictions. So is there anything you experience on a physical level where you feel that you're bound at this time, Mike, Agnieszka?
So for me, it's right now, I'm not feeling the same restrictions as you because the restrictions that are in place where we live right now are not affecting my life at all, seemingly, or maybe tiny little bit. But I do feel like I'm in a holding pattern because Eric is supposed to come to Mexico and he's not here yet. And it's kind of up in the air. Is he going to be able to come or not? So for that, there's a temptation of putting everything on hold and just sort of waiting for that event whenever it may happen. And in that way, I would squeeze myself into a tiny container and like force myself to not do the things that I would normally want to do because no, I'm waiting for this thing, you know. And I think that's a temptation for a lot of people um, outside in the world. Like, okay, well, this thing is going to end soon, so I'm just going to put myself in a holding pattern and wait. Do you guys find that you do that?
Well, I
That's a
think that's I think that's the normal, and I think that's what they prey upon. They started off with an idea that it's just going to be 14 days, and then everything will be back to normal, and then it just kept going. And the reality of the situation is this is not about a disease or whatever you want to call it, but it's about something much bigger. And to some degree, it's a beautiful plan when it's carried out, because like everything else, deception to get people to do the things that you want them to do, despite them knowing what the real master plan is. But this really doesn't have anything to do with that. But in that case, I think the real I think the first step is really to examine what is real versus what is an illusion, and certainly like what you can do versus what you can't do, whether that be physical, as like Dennis pointed out, the emotional state, the mental state. Those things being manipulated in this certain circumstance? What are you thinking about? What are you feeling? What are you dreaming about? All these things are have the potential to be conditioned. And if that's the case, then to some degree you are imprisoned by the thoughts, the box that you've been put in by the thinking and the feeling that's going on around you.
And the worst
So
thing
that
is,
would be my first advice.
yeah, and like Agnieszka, you at the end, I feel that you were already touching upon like the emotional level right there, and when it comes to that, then I think about the lack of being spontaneous, or the lack of the ability to be spontaneous. That's a huge thing which really touches upon the emotional side of things as well. If you're not able to express your feelings freely and without having to worry about what is the neighbor saying, or what is the guy on the other side of the room saying, or then that is really something that I feel is very restrictive. And beyond the situation that we're facing right now, that is something I noticed, because there's a huge difference of how people behave, or the cultural ways of the country I was born and raised in, as compared to other places that I've visited and that I've lived in throughout my life. And that pointed like a huge difference. That pointed out a huge difference. I mean, like, for example, how to deal with emotions and how to express emotions. And I learned that it was rather restrictive, in the place that I was born and raised in. And I can see that in the last decades, that with all the surveillance, and that goes into the system that Mike you were touching upon, with the mass surveillance, the systems, the the electronic devices that we are all dependent on so much nowadays, and then the cameras in every bus, in every train, even out in the streets, and the constant surveillance that already became part of our daily life. That is also really inhibiting our spontaneous natural reactions and expressions of emotions, because even if it's on a subconscious level, but we're always being watched. There's always somebody potentially reading on our posts and seeing what we do, and I feel very restricted by that on the emotional side of things. And I feel that the maybe the worst or one of the worst aspects of the reality that we're living in nowadays is that many of those restrictions and many of those attempts to tame us are actually self-inflicted as well, because we are being nudged. This policy of nudging people. So that's still better than somebody standing above us with a whip and cracking us, in the back with a stick or with a whip. But still, we are being constantly and continuously nudged to do something and nudged to behave in a certain way, because that's how we do it and that's what you're supposed to do, and a little here and a little there. But in the end, it seems that it's taking over our conscious decisions and our free will to a degree, and our free expression of our emotions, of our thoughts, and of our being.
And that's why I was talking about my self-imposed psychological restrictions to my life that are absolutely not based in reality, because I think so much in our current world, the restrictions are not necessarily based in reality, right? They're all imaginary. Just like and the thing is, like with the whole Eric thing, Eric is coming soon, any day now, maybe in a week, maybe in two. I'm like, oh, should I go out for a walk on the street? No, I better not. I'll wait. I'll just go in the garden. You know what I mean? Like, I'm holding myself back from being alive. And why am I doing that? Why am I falling into the propaganda of like, oh no, the street, there may be bad guys on the street, or oh, you don't know what you're doing. I don't need a supervisor. I'm a freaking adult woman. Why do I need a supervisor? Do I need a babysitter to go out on the street and buy a drink from a street vendor? I don't need that. So why am I stopping myself? And why are you guys stopping yourselves? Well, Mike's not stopping anything. He's just flying high.
Well, as a matter of fact, I think that's kind of one of the things that we need, because I think as an example to other people, we need to really kind of be out there and start living again, because I don't think if people don't see any examples of other people living and laughing and enjoying their life, they're going to assume that everybody else is kind of feeling the same way. And, so I definitely, like, this week, every Thursday now, I'm going to go out in the afternoon, although I do have an afternoon meeting. I just basically said, hey, you're going to have to set up Wi-Fi. I'm going to have Wi-Fi where I'm going. So like tomorrow I'm going out to Bonfil, and, I'm going to meet the crew out there in Bonfil, but we're going to, they basically have got me set up with Wi-Fi so I can do my meeting, and then we can, have our local meeting, and we're going to, have it with the locals on the beach.
Yes, I agree with you very much, and I was just talking to some friends as well, and we are planning some things which I won't directly mention here, but the idea is exactly the same. It's like, even without having to stage a protest, but there's more than enough protest in an act of disobedience against unjust laws and unjust rules, and just these days it feels just like you said, just living a joyful life, having fun, and doing things that are normal, supposedly, or that used to be normal. That in itself is already a process which can not only bring quality to your life, but also inspire others, around, which might be a little more fearful than you, or which might think that, this so-called new normal is actually, the way to be from now, and they're already starting to forget about what life used to be. And yeah, Slava Shambhavi is just posting. She said, "Buy a goat." Not sure.
Is that like the Jewish joke thing? Buy a goat. The rabbi says to buy a goat. Okay, I have to tell it from the beginning now. This guy has 7 children, and they all live in the same one-room house. And he's just overwhelmed by the amount of noise and everything. So he goes to his rabbi and he goes, what do I do? I'm overwhelmed. This is too much noise. There's too much going on in the house. I don't have a moment of peace. I work hard for a living and then I come home to this chaos. And the rabbi says, buy a goat. He's like, are you sure? No, no, buy a goat. So he went and he bought a goat. And a week later, he says, "Oh my gosh! Like the goat is pooping everywhere. It's eating everything. It's destroying everything in the house. It has no boundaries. It's the most horrible thing I've ever done. Why, Rabbi? Why did you tell me to do this?" And Rabbi says, "Now sell the goat." So the next day, the man sells the goat. And he goes to the rabbi and he says, "Oh, my life is so much better now. It's so much peace, more peaceful without the goat. I feel, thank you so much. You have fixed my problem. I feel so much better now."
Perspective changes everything.
So I think it was quite interesting.
That's probably not what Shambhavi's talking about, though.
But that was very fitting. I feel where we have been going a while ago is like, so if we take self-responsibility and if we recognize that we are part in the process of taming ourselves, of being tamed ourselves, then what if we, we have the picture that we were painting of the elephant being tied to like a tiny little branch, but still, not just pulling and walking free, but he has been tamed to stand up with that branch and to to obey and be part of the mud circus that we are all part of. So what if we are actually the elephant, but we are also the one who tamed the elephant, and or to a certain extent. So that isn't that the tamer? Yeah, isn't that an interesting perspective as well?
Yeah, I think to a large part that is true, because I think a lot of the conditioning and programming that we have in our head is really non-existent. It functions as the tamer, but the tamer isn't even there anymore. We're managing our own speech. We're managing our own behavior. We're doing all the things like the tamer is there, but the tamer isn't there. And that's kind of one of the things that, like, we are bending, we're bending to our knee. We're taking a knee, and we're taking a knee to an invisible player, to a large degree. I mean, yeah, there's policemen and there's authority figures around, but the reality is that if like the elephant, if the elephant is going to do something, the tamer can't stop the elephant. He can try and stand in the way, but if the elephant wants to do something, and that's really the key. Like the even the police, if the people want to do something, for the most part, the police aren't going to be able to stop them. And that's really kind of the understanding that we've got to have, is the police can't be everywhere at the same time. And it's just like, because we've been so taught to believe that we've got to do things in a particular way, that they maintain this level of control. But the reality is like, if we're going to protest, we all got to go to this spot and protest. No, we don't have to do that. We can just protest by like doing our normal day. And if we all did that, it would be over tomorrow, because everybody, like, there's no way that the policeman could be standing in front of every business and every door and everything, so it's just ridiculous to think that's what has to be done in a way that, like, we all got to get together and protest. No, we just do our own thing, just like an elephant. He just walks out into the forest and boom, he's an elephant in the forest.
And that is a fantastic example for the divide and conquer that we have been mentioning so often, right? And for that to happen, for the elephant to be tamed and for the elephant to stay in place and to obey, someone who is, minute and compared to him in force and in size, there has to be a divide and conquer has to go on, and that's like on an internal level, right? You have to divide the one that is being tamed from knowing of its true power and of its true self. If the elephant knew and was aware and conscious of his power and of that, what he's really capable of, then he wouldn't he wouldn't do
Right.
what somebody else is telling him. And likely for ourselves as well, if we knew, if we stood in our true power, you know who would we be then? How would we act? Which
Yes.
friends, which people would we surround ourselves with? How would we spend our time, our days, if we knew what it means to stand in our true power?
Would we be
Well,
flying on a magic carpet?
possibly. I like the quote. You you develop your character by the things that you say yes to, but your yeses mean nothing until you actually know how to say no. So, like being able to say no to things and then being able to say yes to things and actually mean those things, I think is definitely one of those first steps that people need to take when it comes to like what are you actually going to do? Why are you actually going to do the things that you're doing? Because if you know the why, then the how is really, like 5% of the battle or 1% of the battle. It's the why behind it. And really, if you've lived all your life on your knees, then being able to like take responsibility for yourself is a difficult step. But once you do, it's like, holy cow, I can ride a bike, I can drive a car, I could go to here, I could go there, I could paint a picture. I mean, it's infinite once you start to realize that, it's up to your own imagination what freedom could mean. And it's really just a decision that you got to make to get there. Just to say no to these things and yes to those things, and lo and behold, you're off.
Yeah, I was just I was wondering if you had anyone individually, or maybe like a set of people that was in a precarious situation where they were technically weak or overmanned and overpowered or unfree, and where they, or he or she, managed to untame themselves and free themselves. Or maybe you even have an example from your own lifetime, or people around you
Well,
where that happened.
I do feel like as time has gone on, people have become more and more zombified, I think, to some degree. And there's a lot of reasons why that has taken place. But if you look in the past, and I can think of my own past, I was in the military, and I know of several different situations. I know I experienced one myself. I know that I was called back to the Army in the Desert Storm for 1990, when the U.S. basically went and invaded Iraq and took back Kuwait after they basically invited them in. But in any case, they activated 3 brigades of soldiers, three different National Guard units, one from Louisiana, one from Georgia, and one that was a combination of Mississippi National Guard and the Texas National Guard. I was in that one, but they were in third place. And the first two, Georgia and Louisiana, essentially at some point, those National Guard guys said, "Nah, I'm not going. We're not going to war. We're going to go home." And they did. And those 2 units were deactivated. Now, it was never in the news, but they did. They went home. And,
Are they
I
like
don't know what.
court-martialed or something?
Well, they were National Guards people. They had jobs they had regular jobs and stuff. And they were said, "No, you're being called up to the Army. You're going to, your job is on hold. Now you're going to be a soldier in the U.S. Army." Well, they trained them up with the idea that they were going to send them over there, and as they kept training them, I think they went about 2 months, and that was it. They were tired. They were done. They were very, they weren't actually doing anything like as far as a military, like for us. There's like every day we're doing like a fake battle, and I was in a tank battalion that has like 58 tanks. And in general, if none of the tanks are working, if none of the tanks are operating, then we don't really have any battle because there's no tanks. And so like that's essentially what they did. They wouldn't fix the tanks, so there was no tanks active. So there was 58 tanks out there, but none of them would get to the battle because they were, like something was broke on them or something couldn't start them, or like the air, like a lot of them, they got filters, and when there's sand in the filters, over time the engine basically just is starved of air. And so if the guys don't blow out the dirt in the filters, well, then the engines won't start. And so it wasn't very long before they just decided, you know what, this unit is completely useless. There's no reason that we should be sending them to battle because nobody's going to show up for the battle. But that also kind of goes back to even the Vietnam War. The real reason that the Vietnam War ended is because when they were, they were still actively engaging in battle, although they had supplemented a lot of the American units in Vietnam with South Vietnamese troops and Australian troops and South Korean troops, but there were still American troops that were being sent out into battle. Well, there was a particular fire base in South Vietnam, and the unit that was supposed to replace them wouldn't go. They just absolutely wouldn't go. None of the officers, none of the soldiers would go. And that's really what ended the Vietnam War. Of course, you're never going to hear that in the news. You're never going to hear that in the history books. But the reality was the Pentagon realized that if the morale is so low that an active Army unit is not going to fight the battle, then we're not going to have a battle.
Isn't that a fantastic example of the quality no that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of the situation. I mean, that's really, that's why they spend so much time conditioning soldiers, and why soldiers are so well conditioned, and they practice every day. They basically, over and over again, make it so that they don't even think about what they're doing. They just do what they're told. But that's because they're conditioned. They're very well conditioned to do what they're told. Right? Yeah. And so they're so well conditioned that they'll tell them, like, run that way. Oh yeah, there's a machine gun and it's like sure death. Yeah, go ahead. Run for the machine gun. And they'll do it. And that's kind of the mass hysteria that's a lot of people experience when they go to war. And I think to a large part why people have like PTSD and stuff like that is because it's so inhumane. It's so illogical to do that on a daily basis that like it affects people's mental state for a long time because it just doesn't make any sense. And once you really find out, like, the what's actually going on behind the scenes when it comes to warfare, it's even less illogical. So, but the bottom line is that people have got to that point that even when they're so conditioned, they still say, no, I'm not doing it. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing it. And that's really where people need to be, because that is standing on your feet. That is standing up for yourself.
Yeah, I have an example, another historic one, which also highlights maybe a quality yes to freedom, and maybe a situation where things are so bad that you literally with your back to the wall, and where it's not the nudging going on, but where it's the physical slavery, and I'm talking specifically about the so-called Maroons in Jamaica. So Maroons were former slaves that actually free themselves, and they would flee slavery and hide themselves in the mountains, in the backlands, and eventually have units sent back to free their brethren and sistren who were still in slavery. And in the case of Jamaica, that actually started with when the Spanish were in control of the island. And when it was obvious that the English were taking over the area, the Spanish actually left without a fight. But before leaving, they would actually let go the local slaves that they had in place, and give them weapons. So when the English landed on the shores of Jamaica, they already had like armed resistance And of course they established themselves as the next colonial power in line, and but they were already Maroons or Cimarron. That's the root of the word, a Spanish word, and so they were already wild and tough guys, former slaves who were armed and fighting them from when the English actually came to the shores of Jamaica. And then of course the slave trade, the history of the slave trade, brought many more Africans to Jamaica, because that was the first landing point after the Great Passage over the ocean, and that's where they took up fresh water before they went further to the States. And it goes that the most unruly and untamable ones that came on the ships straight from Africa, they kind of left them in Jamaica because they wanted to avoid further trouble. And then so that history of Maroons, of people who physically freed themselves from slavery, continued throughout the English colonial times, the early colonial times in Jamaica. And they established themselves so much so that eventually the English had to recognize that they were unable to conquer them. So much so that the English actually had a meeting with them, and they signed a treaty granting them authority over a certain part of for example, of the Cockpit Mountains. So there's up to today, there are certain autonomous areas in Jamaica which is not considered to be crown land. And then there are special rules where you have to be, it's kind of like bloodline, that you cannot literally buy and own land as you can in other parts of the country. And it's it's like bloodline related, who is a descendant of the former Maroons and which tribes and whatever. But that shows that it is possible to resist, and it is possible for a relatively small badly armed group and set of people to actually withstand and to stand their ground, literally, in the case of Jamaica, against a world superpower at those times. And funny enough, the same story, just on a much larger scale, actually also happened in Brazil. And there it was actually thousands and thousands of quilombolas. So there it's called quilombolas, who run away from slavery and run away from the colonial system, which had been established mainly on the coastline in the early times of Brazil, when it was called that. And they would hide themselves in the jungle, in the backlands, and they would actually found entire villages and a network of villages. Palmares was one of those networks, the best known one, which at its peak had several thousands of inhabitants, and there it was kind of like an alternative system to the colonial system in place. So there runaway slaves would live together with indigenous population. They would trade, they would barter. There was also some money, but not only money, so that was also interesting from that aspect to see how they managed to live together. And there were even I would say people who were fed up with the regular colonial system. So even people of European descent would actually go and join them and live together there. And for several decades,
kind of like Mexico today.
Mexico. Yeah, a melting pot of people who are looking for a different way. So and there were people and there were army expeditions, several of them sent after them to conquer them. Of course, armed with cannons and professional soldiers, and they were not able to overcome them for more than 70 years, which was also remarkable. And then, of course, there's mystical stories of capoeira being used also in that fight, and of hand-to-hand combat being used by the former slaves and by the inhabitants of the quilombolas. And that also up to today, there are still descendants today in Brazil, in Jamaica, actually in other parts of the world as well, in Latin America as well, who still maintain that culture of resistance and the quilombos or the maroon towns, and who are aware of their knowledge and their heritage, and also are working on networking together and maintaining that. So I thought that was a fitting example, and maybe a hopeful example that it is possible to resist and to stand your ground even against a more potent adversary.
Well, there's a modern example, which is Charan in Michoacan, Mexico. I think it's about 12 years ago, they had a cartel basically come in and start chopping down all their local forests around them. and their forests are basically how they do their economy, because they tap the trees for like this syrup that comes out of the trees. And so that was like their livelihood. And so when they're chopping down all the trees, that they was basically chopping down all their livelihood. And so finally, the people rose up against that, and it was actually led by the women in the it's a city. It's about 19,000 people, from my understanding. But they essentially stood up to the cartel. They basically took their guns away from them. They locked them in the local church, and essentially took the police station, and the politicians were corrupt as well. And essentially they withstood the kind of the state government and the federal government of Mexico kind of pressuring them. They tried to turn off their electricity and turn off their water, but they stuck together as a town and as a community of people, and they withstood the circumstances. They actually marched into like the state capital of Michoacan like every weekend, and basically stopped traffic in the capital, to the point that they just basically said, hell with it. We'll just give you your freedom. And to some degree, within the Constitution of Mexico is a thing called uso se costumbres, which is your own customs, like the customs of your ancestry. If you have customs, then you really have self rule. And so essentially, if you establish that, then there's quite a few towns and villages around Mexico that are essentially living like that. They don't, there's, this is why Mexico is a failed state. The federal government outside of Mexico City really has very little control of the country. And so, they make, on the news, they call them cartels and stuff like that to make people feel like they're, it's an unsafe place. But the reality is that people have established their own rule, and to a large part, that's what actually happens here. The government is just kind of a show that appears to be in control, and they've got flags and stuff like that. But the reality is far different. And that's one of the reasons. But, I did want to say that, when we're talking about no to violence, no to force, that's one thing. That's like violence is really the abdication of creativity. It is desperation. It's like, I don't have any better idea than just basically knocking you over the head to do what I say to do. But there's the other side, which is creativity, and saying yes to things. And when you offer people choices, good choices, they'll say yes to those, because if the alternative is bad and the other is something else, then saying yes to that is pretty easy. And that's really where freedom comes into play. Is it's always that offer of a better choice. And if we have a better choice, if we have the ability to create a better choice, then we're always going to have this opportunity to have good and better choices. And that's really where freedom, like the delivery of freedom, the understanding of freedom is so essential. It is really about making better choices, providing better choices, and not just bullshit choices, but real choices where we have the opportunity to compare two things and say, yeah, I'll take that rather than this. Or maybe it's 5 things, and I'll say, yeah, I'll take the best one of those. But that's where, creativity really comes into play. And once people start realizing that, then violence really becomes the worst choice. And anybody that engages in violence really is idiotic. And yet that's what we've got. Interesting, isn't it?
That's really a prerequisite, right? Like if I think about what do I need in my toolbox as an individual, but then also like at large, as a community, as a people, to untame myself, to untame ourselves. So in my toolbox, I feel preparedness, and to be prepared of what's to come. If you actually lift your head and look left and right, and do, you know, what is the right thing and what you feel, um, you know, and live free, so to say, liberate yourself, without harming anyone else and without depending on violence to do that, then to be prepared is certainly one of the, you know, one of the more important tools that we need to have, because I have to be prepared for the backlash. I have to be prepared, and whatever level we're talking about, you know, whether it's on the physical level, okay, like, am I physically prepared for this? Am I emotionally, you know, stable and prepared, you know, to deal with whatever is going to come? Am I mentally prepared? You know, do I, you know, do I have, even socially, have I, you know, do I have people and positions and friends in you know, in the right places? Can I make a call? Can I count on this guy? Am I prepared? You know, even on a spiritual level, and I feel that is really one, maybe part of the backbone of what it takes to untame yourself. It's to prepare yourself for freedom, because freedom is great and it's nice, but it's certainly not for free. And you certainly have to do something and have to give something for it, and we can learn it the hard way, and, you know, go through struggle and resistance and break through it with brute force, like some of the examples that we mentioned before. You know, certainly it was a physical struggle for the Maroons, for the Quilombolas, um, but then also there is, you know, if we are multifaceted beings, then that struggle is something that happens on all levels, and we don't necessarily have to engage or go down to the physical level and physically fight. Um, Although, you know, I don't say that that does not exist, and there may be situation, you know, where you might confront that, and that's important to prepare for as well. But there are many other levels, and when I, as a capoeira teacher, as somebody who lives and teaches capoeira, I feel that the actual struggle for me is not the physical interaction, the game, even as we call it in the capoeira circle in the game, but the struggle is actually the work, the things that I try to pass on to my students, to those around me, to my, you know, to my friends whom I share this art with. So the struggle is really to get them to see that it's freedom and liberation that we are all striving for, that we're all on a journey for, and the struggle is to to help them to overcome the obstacles that is in their way, and that are also on many different levels. So that is the real struggle. So for me, then, another important view that I like to hold on my way towards freedom and towards liberation is that if it's a fight you're in, learn how to play the fight. And if it's a game you're in, then take the game so serious as if you're fighting in the game. So it's like, you know, in capoeira, it is a game. Yeah, it's a game, and you can be playful, but you can't be too playful. You can't be too, you know. You have to. There has to be the awareness that it's not only a game. It's not only just for joy and for fun, but there's a serious, and there's a importance, and there has to be a consciousness of that, and there's even a danger in the game as well. That is part of the game, because it's not only a game. It's a struggle. It's a fight as well. And if you're in the fight, if you're too caught up in the fight and in the struggle and in the resistance, and you lose the playfulness of that, then in a way you lost yourself, you know, because then you already, you know, you become part of their system, because the violence and the struggle alone, that is what the system sets up for us to stay in there, and to, you know, to stay in that kind of hamster wheel for our entire life, thinking that everything is struggle. And if you lose our playfulness, then we lost, you know, the joy of life as well. So we must maintain that for ourselves at all time.
Well, I would just say that, like, yeah, if you're playing the violence game, obviously the guys that are very good at that are the people that are in charge today, you know. But the other side, the creativity, that's the thing they lack, because their game plan has been like 500 years old, and they're still playing the same damn game plan. And it's just really up to us to say, you know, enough of that, you know, and be creative, because, like, creative is unlimited. There's just a million different things that can be done. And, you know, even an instance of violence, a creative person can come up with a lot of different ways to approach a threat, to, you know, end it without having it end violently. And that's really, you know, like, when people are violent, they have like a singularity of their mind that is like, you do what I say or else, you know. But like somebody that's creative, can come up with a million different things that could potentially lead to them concluding something else. And it's really like, because we just haven't been, because we've been so conditioned, because we've like watched the movies like 5,000 times. I mean, there's 8,000 movies that have zombies in them. How many freaking zombie movies do we need to watch? How many? It's ridiculous that people are
I
still
don't
watching
understand.
zombie movies, and they're probably watching reruns of zombie movies, and they're favoriting zombie movies.
But what
They're
does it mean
emulating
about their
zombie
psyche?
movies.
Are they relating to the zombies? Are they identifying themselves with this, what they see on screen? Like, I mean, normally what we like is what we can relate to. Why are so many people into the zombie movies?
Well, that is what they're programming into their head. That's their subconscious mind is absorbing that. And, your mind doesn't know the difference between illusions and reality. And so to some degree, if you've watched 8,000 zombie movies, you've pretty much become a zombie.
Like when we guys were talking about history, I was going to tell a story about the Polish Haitian troops. And so apparently Napoleon somehow had thousands of Polish soldiers after the Polish Revolution when Poland was erased from the map. And he sent 5,000 of these Polish troops that ended up in his army. They were probably escaping from Poland and ended up in Napoleon's army. So he sent 5,000 of them into Haiti to quell a rebellion. And when they arrived, they realized that the people of Haiti were slaves, and they were in the same situation that Poland was. They were trying to be erased. And so all these Polish soldiers turned sides and stood up against the French army. But because the majority of the army was Polish, they just sort of shoot them away and ended up living in Haiti and staying in Haiti. And it's like a whole thing. There's even a Wikipedia article about this at the Polish of Haiti or something. But yeah, those were people tired of fighting revolutions, like for hundreds of years. They just lost the country and they're going to go somewhere else and do the same thing.
Well, it's similar to the United States too. I mean, the Revolutionary War was fought primarily with German immigrants and German, mercenaries for
We
the
used to
British.
Germans.
And so a lot of the Germans were, I mean, a lot of those German soldiers basically said, you know what, it's freer here in the the colonies. I'm just going to stay here. I ain't going back. And that's kind of where we like a lot of the European got the notion that I want to be where the freedom is. I'm going to the United States or the America or whatever you want to call it.
So how do they untame themselves? What are the step-by-step instructions for our listeners to untame themselves?
Well,
Step one,
Say no to the
don't
bullshit.
bullshit.
yeah,
I think the
overcome.
exposure to TV and radio can really have to do a lot to do with that, because I find that people with more exposure tend to be like repeating this stuff verbatim, even though even they don't believe this stuff, even though I know they know better and I know that they know better, they'll just repeat sentences directly from the radio, and you have to just go, are you sure about this? Like, did you just say this? And then they'll be like, oh yeah, well
I'd say
maybe not.
Well,
step
that,
into your
that,
power as well.
I mean, but
Go on. Sorry.
I was just going to say that has to do with their like the fear response, because that's not really their cognitive thinking. They're not thinking logically. They're just thinking, with their their fish brain, their animal brain. It's really just kind of the base needs when it comes to
Reptilian brain.
that.
There are three levels: reptilian, mammalian, and frontal like thinking brain, Homo sapiens. So the fear response is in the reptilian brain. But I like your fish brain moniker. That's pretty cool.
Some people say there's 4 brains in there. I don't know.
Four.
I haven't looked.
Well, let's get an axe and look. Come on.
The fish one, wasn't that with the attention span that the fish has of 11 seconds?
But does it, or is that another rumor perpetrated by non-fish?
Anyway, what I felt is like of utter importance to untame yourself. As we threw out a few things already, like to be prepared, to be aware of who you really are, to be aware and to stand into your own power, to know of the advantages that you have, because it might be it might be just a few of you, it might be, you might be really tiny and really small, but how can you turn around, how can you use that which is an obvious disadvantage in a, let's say, in a direct confrontation. Okay, you're small in numbers, you don't have good weapons. How can you turn that around and make it into an advantage? And if you look at the history of guerrilla warfare, for example, so there's ways, and that's creativity again, right? There's the creativity that you threw out, Mike, that is important. Like, how can you creatively work with a situation that has been given to you, and transform your weakness into strength? How can
Well,
you?
I mean, like I'll tell you, like even the guerrilla warfare is really not really expanding on creativity. I think there's that's still engaging in violence. Like if everybody wore a black armband, you know, if everybody just agreed that we're going to wear a black armband in solidarity, that would be more than enough to basically show people that, oh, the elephant is starting to wake up. Because if everybody is doing everything together and it's not something that's directed by the government, then they've got to start thinking, hold up, how are they communicating? What's going on here? You know, that's enough to essentially start to get the guys that are the ones that are applying force to start to think, hold on, our numbers aren't that great. I know that I used to, I was a tanker. I was in a tank, probably one of the most, destructive vehicles on the face of the planet. And let me tell you, a tank is not a very good weapon to be in. There's all kinds of weaknesses to a tank, and it
Say
doesn't take very long for a tank to be just a death trap. And so if I'm in a tank and I'm in like a city and there's a lot of people around me, I'm very nervous because there's a lot of things that could go wrong with a tank that could basically put me in a big trap. And so it doesn't take very long to like create that circumstance where the soldiers are starting to think, hold on a minute, I may not be in the best situation, you know, and that's enough to get like once they start thinking that, I'm applying force, those people aren't going to like it. And they're probably going to come back at me with force. And I don't care if it's sticks or bottles or whatever. All those things can like, bust through my skin. And if my tank like runs out of gas, for example, then that tank is really very useless, and it doesn't take, I mean, a tank, even if it's like if it's running for 12 hours, it will run out of gas. So it doesn't take long. And if I can't get gas tomorrow, then I'm stuck.
sitting duck.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that like once those things start to like accumulate, and that's the thing is like it's not, it's not the soldiers that are the ones that are like fundamental crazy SOBs that want to hurt other people. They're just thinking they're doing their job. But once they start to think that their job is going to like end their life, then they've got to start thinking, is this really worth what I'm doing? I mean, what is my paycheck actually, $300 a month? Is that really worth like, losing my life over?
So
Nah.
so in the context of the tame and untaming, then that means if I want to untame myself, I have to know my advantages, what are my strengths, and I have to also know, or I would want to know, the weaknesses of the one who's taming me, of the tamer, whether he's sitting in a tank or whether he's standing in front of me like with a whip in his hand. But to realize
Right.
that, this is actually a small guy, and he's vulnerable as well, and this is the point,
Right.
and this is this.
Yeah.
So
Soldiers still have to sleep. Soldiers still have to eat. Soldiers still have to, you know, use the bathroom. They still got to do all those things. And where are they going to do that? You know, there's just a million different ways that, that like applying force just doesn't work. And, like once people really realize what's actually going on, it doesn't take very long for, for the thing to change, because applying force is really, such a ignorant way to approach the world
and that's a really
when
big
there's
thing.
so many other options.
Isn't that the big thing? And we mentioned that in like about half an hour ago, that the force is in our world not applied in a way or shape that many people even see it. I mean, I've lived in places and I've experienced many situations where it's like, right in your eyes, right in your face. Okay, this is force. They're putting a gun to somebody's head and they force him to do this and do that. And, so that's like right there. But then again, I've also been in place and I'm in a place where still today people are at a level where they cannot see that the world that they're living in, or the system that they're living in, not the world, is tainted to a degree that where they're doing things and they cannot see the force behind them. But it's like, even if I pointed out on them, like, oh yeah, but if you don't do this, if you don't do that, they're gonna knock on your door, and then if you don't obey, they're gonna put you in a cage, and then if you don't do that, or if you resist, then this and that will happen. It's like, wow. But it's like we have gotten to a point where people, I guess in the so-called developed world, often cannot even see the force and the violence that is behind the kind of system that they're living in, because we are being nudged, and the obvious violence, it's like we don't have, we have those non-lethal weapons that have been introduced. War is kind of outsourced, like far away from us, and then the media is blocking is blocking all the wrong news and the scenes that we're not ought to see. So we're so conditioned that actually that force aspect oftentimes is not visible to us again, and maybe when we only see it when it's basically too late, and then of course they have the monopoly on force, on weapons, and guns,
Right.
and so.
But even in that circumstance, the use of force is desperation. So from a standpoint of the person that's applying force, they're desperate. They're scared. That's why they're using force. So to some degree, they're scared for a reason. What might that reason be? That's something to think about. And, again, like, look at what the situation is in Mexico versus the other places where the politician and the head guy, that's, the politician, the political figure in Mexico, is basically saying really nice things. He's like, I'm defending free speech, and I'm not going to force a lockdown and stuff like that. You know why he's saying that? He's saying that because he can't say anything else, because the politicians have to say what the population believes. Otherwise, they're not going to believe him. And so when the situation is that, and because it is the way that it is in Mexico, because people do fight back, they will say no when the force is applied. There's places that the Mexican military can't fly over because they'll get shot down. So they can't even fly over their own country. So I mean, that gives you an idea of like where the population is. And that's, the fact that the politicians have to say what they have to say to basically be in front of enough of the population for them to believe that they're in charge of the country, is a great reflection on where things are really at.
We're getting some comments here. We were right early on with the story, so thank you so much, Agnieszka, for bringing that story. That was hit the nail on the head. I didn't actually know that story, the one with the goat. Shomvi is also saying the gut brain. So with gut brain, I understand that that's like the basic survival instinctive mechanisms that set in to guarantee our survival that we touched upon. And Rodin is commenting, help untame yourself by questioning things you were told, things you think you know, things you think you believe, and things you are learning. Seek knowledge. Benia, glad to have you with us here. Big up to Jamaica.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Yes, and definitely like the on a mental level to question things, right? To question the authority of the small guy with a whip in his hand. That if you get stuck on the gut level, on the instinctive, then it's just that like survival, fight and flight, and we can struggle, we can fight on that level as well for our freedom. But then if you go to the mental, to the intellectual level, then the questioning of the situation, which nowadays also is heavily restricted on in many areas, right? You're not certain platforms don't allow you to ask certain questions or to use certain words, and that is already for me on the intellectual mental level that there's a censorship going on, even if it's not called censorship, but that is a taming even on that level. And I think an example that we can certainly add. And
I'm
Kyra
sorry,
is there
guys.
as well.
I'm
She's blessing up,
take off.
just joining
My
in.
dog is having some kind of an emergency and she needs to go out right now. She's been asking for 15 minutes and I'm going to give in to her because I don't want puke or something in my house. So I apologize. I'm going to bow out right now. If you could finish up this conversation. Hi to all the listeners. Apologies. Oh, I guess I have.
That's
Greetings
okay.
to the doggy.
That's okay. We're about to close out anyway.
She's untaming herself.
Yeah, she's
Yes.
untaming herself.
She's got the message.
Big
Right.
time.
I'm making Michael host so I can leave. Bye. Sorry.
All right. So with that said, Dennis, I think we've kind of wrapped it up. Is there anything else that we need to say? I do feel. I mean, I'm very optimistic. Of course, I'm living in Mexico, so I'm kind of at the place that I think is the best for the situation here. But I don't think that's that it's not unachievable anywhere else. And it's certainly, I think some of the strengths that mankind has, is the things that you know, they've tried to steer us clear of.
Yeah.
So like becoming individuals and becoming like crazy materialized individuals, where we're competing against each other for our stature, when really we should, we really are more tribal. And so when we work together, we, just like, do we all need cars? If we just shared like 2 cars, we could all have like a driver that drives us around, and plenty of freedom. If we just, like we had like a community car or a community van, or community car and a community van, do we all need an individual car to get around? Is really like transportation something that like it has to identify who we are? Do we need like a BMW to like, uh, create like the persona that is who we are?
I feel
Or can we
community
just like,
is a word. The community is the word
so
that you
like,
hit on, that we haven't mentioned before, which is really to untame yourself, to free yourself. If you perceive yourself as being alone, you're the elephant tied to the little branch, and it's just yourself. It's so much more difficult to make that step, as compared to if you know that right over there. So in the jungle, there's a bunch of elephants, and they're all free. And that's where all you have to do is just make this step, and tear the little branch and walk free. Basically, that makes it so much more likely and so much easier if we have community. And that community can be one friend, it can be a few neighbors,
right.
it can be a few friends, and that make a huge difference. And to the point that you made earlier, whether we're in Mexico or God knows where we are, I feel strongly that we're in the place that we are in because exactly right here and right now is where we're supposed to be. And if the circumstances, the life circumstances we may find ourselves in right here and right now, don't allow to free us, let's say on the physical, mental, on all those levels, like right away like this, and we haven't said, we are not prepared, we don't have the community, we don't have the situation that we can just step out, and be free without risking our life, without risking our health, then I feel we have to work with what we have and with what is given to us at that moment. But it doesn't mean to lose hope and to give in. But just like I have this example of a dear friend who is in hospital right now, and I've provided to a family member like a list. I worked for hours to put a list together for alternative ways, solutions, so to say, and to provide him. And he said he'll take care of it, but right now she's kind of in the hands of the guys with the white coat, and he has little to no influence and no way of doing anything. So I said, well, yeah, like if there's no way you can, do something about now, so focus on what she can do right now. So okay, can she change her mindset? Can she work on her emotions? Can she, prepare for the day that she comes out in order to have then the physical things in place? And I feel if we start where we can start, and well, all of us right now, we have a computer, We have this amazing opportunity on the technological level. We have a mind, we have a functional body to a certain degree. So what can we do to untame ourselves on the levels that we can do right here, right now, without anybody, without any help, and just take it from there and see what the place, what the space is allowing, and take it one step at a day, but know where our goal is. No, that's over there in the forest. I want to be an elephant in the forest right there. I want to be with my family, and that's going to be the goal. But right here and right now, whatever I can do, that's what I will do and work, one day at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, and they as much as they push us towards a circumstance where, like, they've got the control mechanisms, they got the social media scores and all that other kind of crazy stuff. Control, the 5G network where everything is Internet of Things and all that kind of stuff. All those things do have some kind of control ideology behind them, but they also can be creatively hacked in a way that can, like, completely change everything. It wasn't just like 100 years ago that everything was run on like horsepower, and there was no electricity and there were no lights, and things were completely different, and the economy was, it still ran. People still ate food and did all those things, and they didn't even have any electricity, and they didn't even have any internet. But now we've got those things, and who knows what we'll have tomorrow. But it's how we creatively take these things and make it into choices that can be, good, better, and best for each person. And when those people have those opportunity to have choices, then we'll get better things. And the thing is that we all have that opportunity to offer those things about ourselves, because we've got a lot of different skills and abilities and talents that we really haven't communicated to each other. And it's really through that we find out that, holy cow, if we use each other's talents and abilities together, there's pretty much nothing that we can't overcome.
Yeah, big time.
So I'm very optimistic about the future. And, that's why, we have Anarchapulco and Agorapulco here in Acapulco every year, is because when we bring those kind of people together, we start to realize, wow, there's a big difference. There's a big difference in the potential for the world than what they're showing us versus what's possible.
Is there a website? Is there somewhere people could follow that up?
Yeah, definitely check it out. Agorapulco, AGORAPULCO.com, anarchapulco.com. I'm gonna try and spell that one. But I don't know. We'll probably put it in the show notes or something like that. But that's happening in March. Anarchapulco is happening 8th through 11th of March. It's online as well. Agorapulco's pretty much in person, but I think we'll probably have some broadcasts and stuff like that. But it'll go on from February 14th through March 31st in Acapulco. If you're an anarchist or a voluntarist or a libertarian or liberty minded, and you can make it to Acapulco, please come check it out, be a part of the community. If you've got something idea or something you can teach other people, or a talent you can display, feel free to let us know, and we'll try and hook you up with a webinar or a workshop or something
I'm
to get
certainly
other
working on my
people in
own.
front of you. Yeah, definitely.
Capoeira shall be part of that. And adding to what you said earlier, I feel strongly about that. It's not only about what we have, what we have in our hands at our reach, but it's how we use it. I've seen and I've lived with people who had next to nothing, but this tiny little bit next of nothing, they use it in a way that transformed themselves, their life, and the lives, around them as well. And if you, just as a metaphor for that, the work with recycled car tires, you have, like, it's a piece of garbage for somebody, and somebody else takes it up and makes a living out of it, or makes something beautiful with it. So it's not only what you have, but it's the creativity again, and it's the spirit and how you use what you have at your reach. And oftentimes, through the things that we touched upon earlier, the media, the brainwashing, the programming that we underwent, we lose the ability to see what we actually have right in front of us. And we're so focused, and then we kept in fear, and then we lose the ability to look left and right and to see, oh wow, oh, that's my neighbor, oh wow, I have this, or there's a there's a old car tire in front of my yard. So it's like, it's how do you use what you have been given. And we have been given a lot. If we have two
Yes.
hands, if you have a mind, if you have a functioning body, we have, like on all levels, we can do something. We can, and we don't even have to do something, we are something already. And if we
Yeah.
step into knowing who we truly are, then wow, what is the limit? Those few people who trying to to tell us that ABC is the limit and we can't do this, we can't do that. No, man, that's only if we believe in it. It takes two. It takes one who controls, and it takes one who lets himself tame or be tamed
Yeah.
or controlled.
Yeah. And man, we have this amazing communication structure where we can connect with people all over the world with great ideas, and we can collaborate on making those things happen. There's a whole transfer of money going into like cryptocurrency and stuff like that. We're talking about $1 trillion worth of investment that's out there in the cryptocurrency now. That's a lot of money that can be applied. And even though the people that are printing paper has got 100 times that, the thing is they're so inefficient with it that even 1 to 100, we can do things so much more efficiently and effectively that it's just no comparison. It really is an abundant world with just endless opportunity out there. And it's just a matter of us changing our mindset to abundance mindset
And that's a
versus a
whole different
scarcity
level
mindset.
of untaming ourselves, right? To stop being dependent on the what they call money, on the little worthless paper. Actually, that is also based on belief, and which is and they're screaming it from the rooftops that this thing is basically coming to an end pretty soon. And yeah, so if we find alternative ways of exchanging value, and of you mentioned the cryptocurrency as well, and going into that, then we're certainly a step ahead of most people at this stage. And yeah, so if we become aware of that which is true, which holds true value, then wow, who will be able to stop us?
Nobody can
Yes,
stop us. Only ourselves. That's the only
exactly.
one.
So
So
let's
make
stop.
the decision. Know what to say no to, know what to say yes to, and start doing it.
Yep. And big up to the Jamaican posse. We have a bunch of people from Jamaica right here live. So there's Mexico, Jamaica, Germany. Wow, if that's not an example of what we can do together. Rodin is posting, yeah, one thing we can really control is our mind. Even our body isn't fully in our control, as it can be influenced by external things, but the mind is one thing we can control fully. Certainly.
Well, the heart too, and certainly the spirit. And I guess that gut brain too. I don't think that one can be controlled either, but we'll see.
Well, that's
But
that's a whole different topic, isn't it? Like control, like who is in control? Is there anybody in control, or are you being controlled? And are you doing anything, or is something being done through you? But maybe that can be the topic for next week. We shall
yeah,
be back Monday for the teaser, for a brief teaser again for next week's, and to introduce next week's topic. And other than that, we're back next Wednesday, same time, right? That's 11:30 Amsterdam Berlin time at night, Mexico
let's
time.
let's say 11:35 because we never seem to
Yes.
hit 11:30. I don't know if we can hit 11:35, but that's one of those things that we've got to get better at, because if people are going to trust us, we need to actually say and do what we're going to do and what we're
True.
going to say.
So we're building trust, and we say 11:37
Yeah,
p.m.
there you
Germany
go.
time, and Mexico time.
Approximately.
What was the
Approximately 4:38 to 4:37 p.m. Mexico time, Central Time in the United States.
Nice one. Well, thank you very much, everybody who joined in today. Um, Thank you very much, Mike. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Agnieszka. I hope the two of them are good. Walking,
Yep,
walking.
yep. Luna got outside. She freed herself. She untamed
I
herself.
did
So
it. Yes, man. Francesca said big up. Colleen is there too. Nice one. We're a full room today. So, with that being said, let's go and tame ourselves on all levels, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and step into freedom. That's where we're stepping into anyway. We're already on the way. whether we know it or not. But if you know it and become aware of it, maybe we can speed it up. And if you join the right people and learn how to say yes and no with a quality tone of voice, the sky is the limit. So with that being said, thank you very much, everybody. And until
Thanks,
next
guys.
week. Bye-bye. Good night.